GMOs, of course, are genetically modified organisms, and there's a very modest proposal in the Senate from Bernie Sanders who says, hey, listen, states like Connecticut and Vermont, where Bernie Sanders is from, have decided that they're going to label foods that are GMOs. They're not making them illegal, they're not banning them, we're just labeling them. And they want to be able to freely do that without getting sued from companies like Monsanto, who are planning these lawsuits right now. And what is Monsanto going to do? How are they going to sue them? I mean, all they're doing is labeling the food. They're not saying don't eat it. They're not banning it. No, Monsanto's thing is you're preempting federal law. So you can't do that. No. No states' rights for you. And of course the Republicans, I'm sure, are against this, right? Because they're in favor of states' rights. So I'm sure they're going to support Bernie Sanders. Hold, I'll give you the vote at the end. Okay? So Bernie Sanders makes some very logical points. He says, the concept we're talking about today is a fairly common sense and non-radical idea. All over the world, in the European Union and many other countries around the world, dozens and dozens of countries, people are able to look at the food that they are buying and determine through labeling whether or not that product contains genetically modified organisms. And in fact, Bernie is of course right. There are in fact 64 countries around the world that require GMO labeling. Once again, for the 100th time, they're not banning them. All they're saying is this food is GMO. If you want to buy it, have at it, Hoss. It's, all of our food is labeled already. This would simply be another thing that we put on there, including the calories, et cetera, that you see on so many of the different food containers, right? Now, who's going to step into the rescue? Well, the Republicans would be too obvious a choice. Everybody knows they're a wholly owned subsidiary of all the multinational corporations throughout the world, so they need centrist, conservative Democrats. So Debbie Stabenow from Michigan will fill that role today. They keep switching around so they can claim to be progressive on some issues. Stabenow says, this particular amendment would interfere with the FDA's science-based process to determine what food labeling is necessary for consumers. See, now look, Stabenow's not going to say, hey, I got paid by these guys, so let's just vote for them even though it makes no sense. So she's got to couch it in terms that seem logical. Oh my God, we're interfering with food-based science with the FDA. Oh, well, we shouldn't do that. But wait a minute, that's not what the amendment says. All it says is, at the states, we're allowed to label the food. FDA can do whatever they want. You want to do science-based stuff? Great! Bernie Sanders is a massive liberal. He loves science. Okay, he's like, yes, FDA, by all means, investigate to your heart's content. But can I have a little states right here so my home state of Vermont can label, and then if you want to label or don't want to label, that's up to you. So that argument by Debbie Stabenow is totally not true. She goes on to say, it's also important to note that around the world now we are seeing genetically modified crops that have the ability to resist crop diseases and improve nutritional content and survive drought conditions in many developing countries. Well, that sounds lovely, and there's a lot of truth to that. Now, look, genetically modified organisms have upsides, they have downsides, and there's a lot of science that still needs to go into studying them to see if they're dangerous, not dangerous, to what degree, etc. And the science is very open on that, right? And they do some good around the world. What does that have to do with whether Vermont labels them? In fact, if you think they're so beneficial, shouldn't you be in favor of labeling? Vermont says this is a GMO. According to Debbie Stabenow, that should be like, oh, fantastic. This is a product that's saving lives across the world. I will buy that product, right? Perhaps you're not so sure. One last thing from Stabenow, she says, we see wonderful work being done by foundations like the Gates Foundation and others that are using new techniques to be able to feed hungry people. Okay, and that is related to how Vermont can label their food in which way? You see, this is how Washington works. They don't just come out and say, I took a legalized bribe in order to vote with Monsanto. They say, oh, the Bill Gates Foundation, look over there. Hungry people over there. We saved some poor people over there. All these distractions that have nothing to do with the actual issue. So given the clear lack of logic on Stabenow's side, a nearly inarguable position of Bernie Sanders, it's a fortress argument. It's nearly impossible to defend against. Obviously, Sanders won, right? I think you see where this is going. The Senate vote, 71-27, against Bernie Sanders, against the legislation, and in favor of Stabenow's nonsense arguments. Because who gives a damn about what's real, what's right? Monsanto and the other food companies pay the checks. That's where you get your donations, and that's the way you vote. no matter what silly justification you have to give it.